Since its creation in 1969, the Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO, has prided itself on getting results as efficiently as possible. A key figure and driving force in its early years was one Vikram Sarabhai, a leading scientist today remembered as the father of Indian space travel. Sarabhai served as the first chairman of ISRO, and under his watch, India emerged as a new voice in space, at a time when the US and Soviet Union were at the peak of the space race. We took an in-depth look at the rise of ISRO in another recent video, so check that out after this one. But one of the key themes set out by Sarabhai was success without overspending. From the beginning, ISRO knew it couldn't economically compete with other spacefaring nations, but it believed that it could still have an impact technologically, and so it has proven. Today, in many ways, the landscape hasn't changed all that much. America and Russia still have two of the highest profile space agencies on the planet, and ISRO is still one of the lowest spending of all major space organizations. The ISRO annual budget comes in at around $2 billion US. For NASA, it's more than 10 times that, with $22 billion in 2020. And yet, for all NASA's recent achievements, ISRO has had undoubted success too. In 2008, Chandrayaan-1 became the first Indian probe to orbit the Moon. Then in 2014, the Mangalyaan probe successfully entered orbit around Mars, a feat that ISRO impressively achieved at the first time of asking. In 2017, ISRO launched 104 satellites into the sky aboard just one single rocket, a then world record. Meanwhile, in 2015, it launched AstroSat, India's first space telescope, to get an even better view of the universe. So what happens if you take all those missions and throw a NASA-sized budget at them? What if ISRO had 10 times as much money? With real-world finances, India's future plans in space include a long series of Earth observation satellites dedicated to investigating our climate and oceans, another Chandrayaan mission, this time aiming to soft land on the lunar surface, another Mars orbiter mission, breakthrough probes to Venus, Jupiter, and the Sun, plus ISRO's first ever crewed mission with the Gangayaan spacecraft scheduled for a delayed launch in 2023. Not bad for 1/10 of what NASA gets. That last one, though, is most likely where we'd see the biggest change if India's budget for space travel were suddenly to boom. As of early 2021, the number of Indian astronauts is still very low compared to other nations. Rakesh Sharma became the first when, in 1984, he was one of the three-man crew on the Soviets' Soyuz T-11 mission to the Salyut 7 space station. But India falls well short of the likes of the US, Russia, Japan, China, Germany, France, and more when it comes to this particular measure of space travel. And ISRO has never launched a crew in its own spacecraft before. That's set to change with the Gaganyaan, however, a soon-to-launch state-of-the-art vehicle that will carry 3 ISRO astronauts, or Vyomanauts, on a continuous route around Earth 250 miles above the ground for around 7 days. Of course, safety is paramount, and India has a proven track record when it comes to making as few mistakes as possible. So the mission won't be rushed. It has already been knocked back from an original launch date of late 2021 to a new target in the year 2023. Had it a greater budget, though, we might have expected to have already seen an ISRO crewed spaceflight by now, or even many of them. But to what end? The Chandrayaan program shows that ISRO does have a long-held interest in getting to the Moon, and in a time when most other modern-day agencies are debating crewed lunar missions once again, including NASA, Roscosmos, ESA, and the CNSA, you might reason that an ISRO with 10 times the funding would follow suit. But perhaps not. Arguably, the biggest and most significant goal that ISRO has set for itself for the near future is to build its own space station. So if anything, it would probably put the extra cash towards that. Throughout history, ISRO has proven time and time again that it's a world leader when it comes to building and launching satellites. So a modular space station is an expected next step. Little has been revealed about the plans for the build so far, except that it will start between 5 and 7 years after Gaganyaan. Naturally, if ISRO had a bigger budget, then that timeline would almost certainly shorten. It's currently hoped that an Indian space station would be able to house a crew for up to 20 days at a time at first, before stays on board lengthen as the station gets bigger and gains more functionality. Again, though, with a higher budget, all of that would likely happen much faster. And once more, given ISRO's reputation for succeeding with its main goals most of the time, we might expect this particular space station to grow and expand quickly. In normal times, ISRO isn't the only major agency with plans to build something to rival the now iconic ISS. China, too, has well-publicized ambitions to build its own space station, while Russia has said it also aims to re-enter this particular aspect of the new space race with plans for an orbital station sometime in the 2030s. It remains to be seen how ISRO's efforts will rank alongside these, but it's a fair bet that in the real world, they will be striving to compete on just a small percentage of what their rivals spend. In an alternate world where India had NASA's budget, however, ISRO could well leave the others for dust. But what about its other ambitions? The Aditya L1 probe is scheduled to be India's first solar mission. It's hoped to launch in 2022 and will specifically study coronal mass ejections, the likes of which very nearly caused a major geomagnetic storm on Earth in 2012. Meanwhile, the Shukriyan-1 mission is a Venus orbiter, hoping to gauge a better understanding of the hellish Venusian atmosphere, with a launch date tentatively penciled in for around 2025. But both also constitute joint ventures at the moment. Aditya L1 is led by ISRO, but in collaboration with a number of private institutions and universities. The full funding for Shukriyan-1 isn't confirmed as yet, but there are ongoing talks between ISRO and the National Center for Space Studies in France for a collaboration there, too. If ISRO had NASA's budget, would it still be so interested in partnering up with other companies or government-backed agencies? Perhaps not. As history has actually played out, ISRO has made it a trademark of theirs to be ready and willing not to go it alone. India's success in space has often come via partnerships, particularly with the Soviet Union in the early years. It's one reason why ISRO doesn't yet have a public profile to match NASA's, or even ESA's, or the CNSA's. But if the financial landscape was leveled between Indian and American space travel then, going by track record alone, ISRO could ultimately dwarf NASA in terms of achievements made. But would that make it a better space agency? Maybe yes, maybe no. During a speech given in 1968, the ISRO founder Vikram Sarabhai said that there should be, quote, no ambiguity of purpose, that ISRO did not have the, quote, fantasy of competing with other wealthier nations. But he also pledged that ISRO would play a, quote, meaningful role in the application of advanced technologies to man and society. 1/5 of the way through the 21st century, and few would argue that Sarabhai's vision has been realized. ISRO is already at the top table of space travel, and it's gotten there in its own way. In general, if its budget were to increase tenfold, then that could only be good news. More ISRO missions equals more success stories at an ever-increasing rate. The entire solar system could suddenly seem a lot more accessible. But here's hoping that this alternate version of the Indian Space Research Organization would hold on to its key traits. More often than not, ISRO approaches space travel as though it should truly be a joint venture by the citizens of Earth. It's why so many people are so excited by what it could achieve in the future. And hopefully, that's what would happen if ISRO had the